Welcome to the You on the Camino de Santiago podcast, Season 5. This podcast is for and about people getting ready for their first ever pilgrimage on the Camino de Santiago in Spain, France, and Portugal. With your host, Camino guide and longtime pilgrim, Nancy Reynolds of the Camino Experience. Coming to you today with another healthy dose of reality on the Camino Francés. Hi, this is Nancy, back this week with Melissa, who you met in Season 4, Episode 10. Melissa had a plan to walk the Camino as a way to reclaim what she remembered as her badass self from her 20s. Who wouldn't want that, right? Melissa had a few surprises along the way, including a vastly different experience of the meseta than she had expected. She discovered why you don't want to rush the start of your pilgrimage and why the end, from Sarria to Santiago, isn't as bad as people say it is. Melissa lost a few things and ended up finding even more than she lost. She almost went home due to illness, but by sticking with it, she discovered something very significant, which you're going to hear about. And Melissa is going to share her pro tip for getting a bed at Refuge Orson, which is one of the places you can stay to break the first giant stage out of Saint-Jean-Pied-du-Port into 2 smaller stages. She has lots to say, so we'll get right to it. The only thing I want to mention before we reconnect with Melissa is if you would like to join me on the Camino Francés in 2025, now is the time to say yes to making your Camino dream a reality. As of October 2024, I am currently filling my May and September 2025 Camino Experience groups. Find out why this is such a great way to get started on your pilgrimage on my website, thecaminoexperience.com. Now, here's Melissa. Well, I am happy to welcome Melissa back to the podcast. Hi, Melissa. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Nancy. This is so much fun. I'm so glad to be back. Yeah.
Well, it's great to get a chance to talk about your Camino with someone who understands, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, my God. That is the most fun thing after.
Yes.
Reaching for people. Yes, definitely.
Do you have many people at home who want to have long conversations or want to hear all your stories?
I had a Zoom with 2 people who've done it separately, and we could not get off the Zoom. It was like, okay, now it's an hour and a half. Now it's like, oh, I want it to end. And then a friend who I talked to before I went, just by phone, because he's in North Carolina, was up here with others for dinner, and we just could not stop talking about it. So it's fun to share, and people ask, right? Our friends ask us. So I like the questions that were like, okay, did you have a favorite day, or did you learn anything special, or but when you're talking with somebody who's been on the Camino, they're saying, oh, what about walking down to Molina Seca, right?
Yeah.
I know exactly what they're talking about. And
Yes.
then anybody who's listening is going to know exactly what that means when they do it.
Yeah, these shared experiences and these impressions that are stuck in our senses of where we were and how we felt and what the weather was like that day. Some of those things we'll never forget.
Yes. And I had all the weathers, but the rainy weather was toward the end, which was great. Yeah, and just I liked not like every day is new, and you wake up every day. And one of my friends texted me and said, I cannot wrap my head around what a gigantic adventure you're having.
Right. So he's going to just have to go walk the Camino, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, let's get started by putting the pin in the map, as I like to do. And will you remind us what route you walked, when you started, and how much time you took and where you started.
Okay. I took the Francés
Okay.
and I started in Saint Jean on May. I arrived in Saint Jean on May 8th
Okay.
and started walking the morning of the 9th.
All right. And as far as Santiago?
I went all the way to Santiago and I took exactly 6 weeks from I left on a Thursday and arrived on a Thursday.
Okay. The full Camino Francés. Excellent.
Yes.
So your first day out of Saint-Jean-Pied-du-Port, did you go all the way over the mountain to Roncesvalles, or did you stop at one of the places going up the mountain?
I was very, very, very lucky and very purposeful. I stayed at Orison, and I think when we talked last time, I was going to get the express Beauregard. I was going to walk up, and that all sounded fine. But I did a little trick, and I kept the browser open for Orison. And every day I checked it 2 or 3 times. And then I found the date that I wanted, and I nailed that.
Oh, wow. Because they do get cancellations. So today they might look full. You go back tomorrow or in a week, there's a spot open. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. What did you like about Refuge Orson?
Well, crazy thing is I probably left Saint Jean about 7:30 in the morning. So beautiful, so exciting. I was walking by myself, and the walk up is a rigorous walk, and everybody talks about it. And I was there by 11:30, and I was totally shocked when someone said, "Oh, there's Orison." I wasn't not expecting that. I was thinking, it'd be a few hours more. It's beautiful. The location is fabulous. When you get into the room, the bunk room, this giant window that looks out, on Heidi Land.
Out over the Pyrenees. It is an extraordinary view.
Out over the Pyrenees. And then just it's the really first, because I did not stay. There are a couple of places I know people stay in Saint Jean where they feel like they're connected. The place I was just, you're all on your own. And it was a bunk, but nobody was connecting us. And the dinner is so wonderful. And everybody stands up and says, maybe their purpose of doing the Camino. And different people just people's stories, 40 different people's stories. So they become important. And it also established our first group of walking. So I walked with a group of about 8 people, and we have stayed connected all the way through with a WhatsApp group. So that was nice.
Isn't that something? I love the dinner with that dining room with the 40 or 50 people on those long tables, and they just run out the food like mad, just serving up the different courses. And then there's all those conversations going on while you're eating.
Yep.
Oh, it's such a wonderful experience. And then you wake up the next morning with that sunrise. Was it clear enough for you to have a beautiful sunrise?
It was picture perfect, blue skies, puffy white clouds. And I think 2 days before that, it was socked in.
Uh-huh.
And then I talked to people like the next day and the day after, it was socked in with rain.
Yep.
So I really, really lucked out. There was plenty of mud on the route. So you knew that it had been muddy, but rainy.
Yeah. So how was the walk from Orson to Roncesvalles and on to Borghete? How was that for you?
Oh, I loved it. I just loved it. I've got to say, because there's so much talk about, shoes and things and this and that. And I settled on the shoes that I was going to take. And part of it was from what, I've really kind of whittled down from what others had told me worked for them. And then I started with the Injinji toe socks with merinos over them. That worked so well for me. But I had Ultra Lone Peaks.
Okay.
And they're seriously flat. They're seriously no cushion. And I left my Hokas in my bedroom, And so I kept thinking, oh, I brought the wrong shoes. I brought the wrong shoes. And I also have boots and I didn't bring boots. And I thought, oh, my feet are going to die. These are so flat. And so, no big cushion. But they were fine. They were fine.
Say again what the brand was, what shoes they were.
Ultra. Is it Ultra or Ultras? Ultras Lone Peaks.
Okay. So people who are having trouble finding the right shoe, you give those a test run, see how they do.
Yeah.
All right. So when we look at this whole experience of walking the Camino, if you were to pick out a highlight, is there any section or experience or anything you would say, whoa, that surprised me. That was unbelievable.
So many things surprised me and were unbelievable. I can't say one thing. The times that I was just alone, and as far as I could see in front of me and as far as I could see behind me, there was no other person. That is very special. And as a female, not to feel in any way anything but glorious, not threatened, not lost, that sense of just, this is perfect. This is perfect. Knowing that I will see people, I will find people, but that I had all that all to myself for those, minutes to sometimes a couple hours.
Beautiful. And how often in our lives do we have that luxury of being truly on our own in a place that feels good?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I have to say that for all the talk about the things like, oh my God, that's so hard, that's so hard. For some reason, I hadn't heard how hard Zubiri was, and that was really something.
Are you talking about the descent, the final 4 kilometers into Zubiri?
Into Zubiri, it's those sort of dragon's teeth rocks. There were 2 mountain bikers who kept trying to get past me. And I finally said, you need to just wait. There's no place for me to go. There's no side. You can't, it's just brush. You can't go to the side. And I said it very nicely. And they said, okay. So
it's one of the challenges for walkers on the Camino is cyclists, to share the trail with cyclists. And when you have a narrow path and an uneven path, and that section gave a lot of pilgrims problems this spring.
Yes.
There were a lot of injuries and a lot of people slipping when the rocks were wet. And it's the final 4 kilometers into Zubiri, and you really have to take it slowly and mindfully.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then a cute group of probably late 20-year-olds came through, and one of the guys said, go this way. And he opened his legs really wide and kind of did a wide walk with a little bit of a bounce.
Okay. That'd be fun to see.
It was very fun to see. And he disappeared.
It worked. Okay. That dude's gone. So the Zubiri is one of the difficult, memorable parts. How about a spectacular part, something that you maybe heard you would love, wouldn't love, some people love, some people don't?
I was not at all sure that I would like the meseta, that it's flat, it's 180 kilometers, that it can be very, very hot, just long, flat. I had this picture of, I don't know what, somebody had said, oh, it's like Nebraska, or it's like, oh. And you had said you loved it. This friend Benton had said it was his favorite part. I started hearing, as you talk to people who've done the Camino more than once, I adored it. I adored the fields of poppies and wildflowers in the quiet time, walking with somebody. It was really like this heartbeat of your sticks and the conversation and your footsteps.
Beautifully said.
Yeah. At one point when I was walking by myself, I thought it sounded like a sonogram.
Oh, interesting.
A baby heartbeat. Because your steps and your sticks and Oh,
Uh-huh.
I just loved it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
When something is even better, right? It's like you're a little hesitant. So this is, oh, okay, well, I'm going to do this. I'd thought about, I knew people who were renting bikes. I
Hmm.
met a couple of Australian girls who were doing e-bikes and, oh, I could do that. And so I think what helped was that I knew there were options,
Hmm.
if it's really not right, you could do this. There's an option for
Yeah.
some.
It's so interesting when people talk about sections of the Camino and there becomes sort of a lore or a legend about certain parts and so many people skip this and oh yeah, it's boring, you have the meseta, you got to skip that wouldn't make a bit of difference if you didn't do it, and if you have to skip something, skip that.
Yeah.
And this builds up and it becomes urban myth basically, or Camino myth.
Yeah.
It brings me back to one of my top tips from season 1, which is don't believe everything you hear or read about the Camino. Go find out for yourself.
Go find out.
You may have an experience that blows your psyche or blows your mind. And yeah.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I think is super important is I'm part of a few Facebook
Mhm.
groups. And as supportive and wonderful as that has been, the the fear and like scarcity element of you won't find bed and you won't get this and you're going to get blisters and you're going to have this and that. And even while I was on the Camino, I saw somebody posting saying, ladies, be careful. I've heard from several people that so it was third person. I've heard this or that. And it's like, I'm here. And there's almost always a bed or two available, even in the places that say they're completo. And that I definitely knew people who were walking into town and finding places.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to go back to clarifying what it means when people are saying this place is sold out or it's super busy and there are no beds. That means on that day in that place. But a stage ahead and a stage behind, there could be plenty of beds. Tomorrow, there could be plenty of beds. So unless it's you right there, you have to really understand the relativity of it.
I liked that on Wise Pilgrim. It wasn't for every town or anything, but when I was looking, because I was booking a day ahead, and I would look up on my Wise Pilgrim app to see, I know where I'm going to go. Now I need to find a place and get in touch. And they started doing plenty of beds or many beds today. So it'd be the day before I was booking. And that was like, okay,
Hopeful.
hopeful. Yeah.
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 Great. Great. So did you walk the whole way, the whole 790 or 800, however many kilometers there are?
It was my intention.
Great. That's how we all start.
And I said that all the way, my intention when people ask, I developed what I thought was just like Camino cough. I had just was coughing and coughing. And then it just like really settled in my chest and head. And I got like a wicked kind of respiratory infection. And I was able to get to a clinic. I was the only guest in this teeny weeny little village. And the woman who was my hostess at a donativo, she said, well, I will drive you tomorrow to the clinic. Because I was trying to figure out how I'm going to have to find a cab and all that. So I took a rest day. The next day, I took a cab from the town where the clinic was and just gave that to myself. Okay, a 15-minute cab ride. I'm just going to rest today.
Right.
The next day was the day going up O Suburero,
Oh, big day.
big hiking day.
Yeah.
And I had walked with a guy from the Czech Republic. He knew the guy who owned the horses. And I just kept saying the only way I'm getting up that mountain is on horseback because I just don't have the lung capacity. I'm coughing too much. And he was able to arrange one of the 5 horses for me.
Perfect. So in case people don't know, that's Victor. And he has his little stable of horses. And every day he takes a small group of pilgrims up that intimidating mountain. Yeah. How was that experience? Tell us about that.
That was really fun. And Victor's wonderful. We all had a beer the night before. And when I'm sort of coughing over to the side, well, they're all smoking because they're European and they were all smoking. And we were chatting. He couldn't have been nicer. And he was asking, and I do ride, so that was good. He said, did I mind a new horse who was a little skittish? So that sounded kind of fun.
That sounds like a nightmare to me.
Yeah, I know. I wondered about that.
That's great.
But it was great, with the sheep and the bikes and all this stuff going one way and another, and just trusting that this horse knows what it's doing. And
Yeah.
it was very, very beautiful. But he suggested, when he heard me coughing, I said, I don't know if I'm going to have to, have another couple rest days. And he said, well, why don't you rent an e-bike? Which I had not thought about. I mean, I thought about it for the meseta. And he said, I can get you an e-bike and you can take it for 2 days and that maybe you'll feel a lot better. And that's exactly what I did. I had it for 2 days.
Where did you pick up the bike? Or did they bring it to you?
He had it brought up to Osabrero. So when whoever went with him, I don't know, there was somebody that, they were taking our luggage. So whoever brought the bags or backpacks brought the e-bike. And I paid that guy, I guess it was, a friend. And he just said, you're either going to run out of juice or you're going to feel better. Let us know where you've left it.
Oh, that's hilarious. This is Victor's side hustle.
Yeah. Yeah. So I went from, I went,
That's the best. I
yeah.
haven't heard, almost 20 years on the Camino, and I hear new stuff every year, all the time. It's fabulous.
And that he was like a big guy in finance and left that world when, life just got too much.
Oh, man. So I want to be sure that people know where to get the horses. So Victor is in a small village called Las Herrerias. It starts with an H, which is silent in Spanish. Herrerias. I'll have that in the show notes. So you can reach out to Victor when you're approaching Herrerias.
Yes.
It's great.
It's beautiful. And if you know that that's what you want to do, you have to book it ahead.
Book in ahead. He only has 5 horses, right?
He has 5 horses and people were calling and calling and calling.
Okay.
And actually his picture is in the Brierley book.
Oh, great. Very good. I bet his number's in there too. I'll double check that. Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. It's such a reminder to me that we set out with an intention to walk the Camino. But I think if we can take a step back, what I realize is it's a journey from where we start to Santiago. And the idea is to make the journey however you make the journey.
Mm-hmm.
And you did that. You adapted, you bent as you needed to and rolled with it. When you look back over that, do you have any regrets or any ill feelings about having those plot twists and having to adapt?
Oh, no. I think when I hear, I know some people feel, if they skip a town, they're going to go, if they taxi, they're going to go back. I did not have that feeling. I knew that I just didn't want to go backwards at any point.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually got in Samos, I thought, you're really like one day out of Sarria, right? For the end. The end is in sight. And I really felt ill. And I knew somebody who'd ended up in the hospital with a chest thing. And so I actually booked a flight home a week early.
Oh.
And that night, I kind of just tried to rest that day when I finally got into Samos and had a cute little place. And I went to there's a beautiful, I think it's the largest monastery in Europe, right? In Samos.
I don't know if that's true, but it's a beautiful monastery.
Yeah. And it might be the largest it's the largest.
It's big. It's a big monastery.
And it's beautiful. And there was a tour at 5:30 and I met up with, not intentionally, but as happens on the Camino, 4, 5, 6 people that I've seen before. And one of the guys that had heard me coughing so badly one night, and he said, what can we all do to make it possible for you to walk to the end?
Oh, I love
Isn't
that.
so great.
Love that.
I saw somebody at dinner. I just went to a little restaurant, and he was like, I hope so much you're able to do it. And then on the walk, I really love this story because it was really made a difference for my whole trip. I was walking toward Sarria, and I was going to get a car and go to Madrid and that was a Saturday, leave on Monday. So after I left the monastery and I walked, there's a beautiful river there, I felt such a sense of loss. I felt relieved, of course, that I could go home and feel better. And then I felt an enormous sense of loss, that I won't be walking, that I'll be home, that I won't be walking. And so the next morning, when I ran into a guy that I always called Alan from England, and we started talking, and I told him, that I was going to go and stay overnight in Sarria and then take a car the next day to Madrid. And he said, well, I remember how sick you were a couple of nights ago. Are you any better today? And I said, yeah, I feel better today than I did then. That was terrible. And he said, so tomorrow you might feel better. And I said, well, I hope so. And he goes, well, then 2 days when you're getting on the plane, you'll feel even better.
I see where this is going.
How are you going to feel if you're on the plane and then in your living room when you could be walking your last week? And we did a little stop, and I canceled my flight. And I didn't even have a flight. At that point, I just canceled my flight. And I told him, and we both kind of did a little dance. And I stayed overnight in Sarria. And then I had that last week.
Wow.
And we made a little Camino family for my last week, which was kind of my dream, to walk in with friends.
Oh, so beautiful. How did it feel to walk into Santiago de Compostela?
It was big. It was a very foggy, sort of heavy day. It had been raining a lot. And what we did is I stuck with Alan, and then Alan said, we'll stay together. We'll stay together for the rest of this walk. How about that? And I was like, oh my gosh, that'd be wonderful, because he knew everybody. Everybody knew him. You'd hear his name being called, and he had these friends and those friends. And then I met this wonderful woman in one of the funkiest albergues I stayed in. And she walked in and she goes, oh no, because it was wet and sweaty. It was a very rainy day. Everybody's wet here, the hot showers. It was small. And Alan offered her a glass of wine and gave me a glass of wine. And she was Spanish, and we just chatted. And then she went off very early the next day, but we ran into each other. All of us ran into each other 2 days later. And somehow it all just came up. We're all going to walk into Santiago together. So it ended up being 10 of us holding hands, taking up the entire arch.
Oh, you're going to make me cry.
I burst into tears. I cried. Oh my God. Because you know the arch. We took up the arch. That was it.
Wow.
And we all walked in, we whooped and hollered and, made ourselves known. It's pretty fabulous.
Oh, I'm so touched by that. I can imagine that. Wow.
Memorable. And I have, so what was fun was this lovely man, Franz, that I walked with for 3 days. I met in Estrella. We were staying at in the same room. And we were walking out early the next morning, and he said, well, yes, let's walk together. So we ended up walking together from Estrella to Logroño. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the 30-kilometer days, and he was going to do 2 more. And it was like, I don't even know why you want to do that.
Those are big days.
Big days. So as people do, you stay in touch through WhatsApp, and you may never hear from someone again, or you may hear a couple times. And And then he would check in. He was really moving fast and ended up with a group he enjoyed a lot. And then he went down to Finisterre and Muscia. And then he said, "You must be near the end of your trip." And yeah, I said, "Yes, I'm 2 days away from coming into Santiago." And he goes, "I'll be there. I leave the day after."
Oh,
So what was
perfect.
so sweet is he was on the far side, not the inside of the arch, but on the far side, just standing there. And it was like, "There's Franz Melissa." And he said, "I can take your photos as you all go in."
Perfect.
Isn't that nice?
I'm going to take a break and just cry and let this emotion out. I just can imagine it. Uh, wow. Yeah,
It was
so special.
it was so, so special. And you kind of want to hold on to it. Okay, this is the end.
Yeah,
Um, and then to watch others come in too,
the
right?
best. The best.
Oh my gosh. And then there's somebody and somebody was racing off to get their Compostela. I didn't even get mine until the next day. I just wanted to savor. I was in no rush to start winding things up. And the wonderful woman, Leo, that I met in Portomarin, and we walked in together. When she heard I was going to be in Madrid for 2 nights and, staying finding a hotel, she said, "No, no, you'll stay with me." So I stayed with her in Madrid, and now she just WhatsApped me yesterday, and I really feel like I have made, you say friendships, and there's so many ways to say that, but real
Real connections.
connection.
Yeah. You know what I take away from your story, Melissa, is this is a this is a big journey. This is start in Saint Jean, finish in Santiago. When you're in Saint Jean Pied du Port, you have no idea what's ahead.
No,
And you could say that at every step along the way because it can go one way for the first part. And then the next part, something else can happen. It could be completely different. And then the
yeah,
next part, and then the next part. And you just don't know what the road has for you. And so what I see from your story is just stay on the road. Just keep
keep
going.
going. And I would like to add to that by saying, maybe don't jackrabbit start. And what I mean is, you've trained and trained at home, and it's like, "I'm so excited." I met so many people who just went fast and furious their first few days and then ended up with, you know, some injuries that then
Mhm.
you might be taken off the Camino with your injuries.
That's it. That's why one of my top tips from season 1 is don't rush the start.
Don't rush the start. And, PS,
Don't rush any of it.
don't rush anything. And then I want to share that within that first week, because I remember saying this to Franz. So it must have been in my first week. I said, "I have a birthday coming up this summer, and I know what I want. I want to ask my son to walk 2 weeks with me."
Love that.
So I just asked him a couple nights ago. First, I asked his girlfriend because I want to go with him, and I didn't want her to think it wasn't,
Yeah.
and and so she and I talked on the phone, and she goes, "Oh, that sounds super cool." I said, "If I do 2 weeks with him, and then you meet us, and we can either walk to Finisterre, or we go someplace else." And then I asked him a couple, and he's like, "Wow." I said, "You don't have to answer me now." "No, no."
Think about it until you're ready to say yes.
I know, I know.
Right.
Do you know the app Polar Steps?
Yes, I've never used it personally, but I know of it.
So I used that, and somebody had told me right before I left, "You've got to use this."
Okay.
And that was my way of blogging and staying in touch. You just invite the people you want.
Okay.
And I loaded my photos, and then I wrote. And I wrote more and more personally, more and more vulnerably, more and more deeply, more and more from my heart, that I started having people responding and saying, "I've known you. I didn't know you thought this way, or that you wrote so well, or it was, and what it was also writing for me.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about that 20-year-old and me in my 20s and the kick-ass kind of badass 20s.
Yeah, that was who you wanted to rediscover when you were on the Camino.
And I wrote all the time because I was traveling through my 20s, and I journaled and wrote letters, and this felt very similar. Very similar. Like,
Oh,
I'm writing so that I remember everything.
you're making a record of your journey. So important.
It's so important.
Yeah.
And Nancy, how the days can kind of like, okay, where was I then?
Yes. Bit of a blur. Yes.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful blur. But being able to go back and look day to day to day at, the photos and the thoughts, and it included, today I really doubted myself, and I feel lonely, and everyone else seems to have a friend, or whatever that day has, whatever that day holds.
Ah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Now you're at the end. So you're home and you're reflecting.
Yeah.
You got to Santiago, and that final push was just obviously very impressive for you and very significant.
Mhm.
Was there anything that someone else, when they hear the story, they would go, "Oh my gosh, that's the worst thing that could have possibly happened. I'd be devastated." Not like I'm looking for negative things, but I think we need to be realistic that things go bump sometimes. So, and any experiences on your end for that?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3.
Oh, three. Okay, let's have them.
Yeah, and it was my first night, second night, and fourth night. Boom, boom.
Okay, one right out of the gate. All right, and they didn't have you turn around and go home. So let's hear what these were and what you did about them.
So I walked up the mountain from Saint Jean, oh my God, this is just so spectacularly beautiful. I'm so, so lucky. I'm so in my skin and in my body, and this is wonderful. And then at Orasan, I started unpacking and didn't think much of it, and I put stuff out on my bed. And then I came back later to have a shower, and it's like, wait a minute, where the heck's this? And I realized I left an entire packing cube in the place I stayed in Saint Jean.
And that probably had some important things in it.
It had some very important things in it. It had things that you should never leave in your backpack, like
Oh,
prescription, you know, my spare glasses, things that you just need to have not be gone.
that's a very interesting way to say it. I'm in full panic mode and I'm having a meltdown. Oh, those things should not be gone.
And it was at that point, I guess it was after dinner when I really realized it. And so I went back to the dining room and talked to someone, and they said, well, you should call the place. I think I even reached out to you because I knew you were coming in a few days. I tried everything.
Yeah.
And then I was able to reach the woman at I don't think, no, she was a hostelaria. She was
The host, whatever the host was.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she's like, yes, you left it. I will have it sent to Roncesvalles and it will be there. And then goodbye.
We're being very brief. Was this in French by any chance?
It was mostly in French.
Yeah.
And then when I got there, because I wasn't staying in Roncesvalles, of course it was there, along with other people's things.
And how did she do it? Did she send it with the luggage transport service?
Sent it with the luggage transport, which
Genius.
So I just kept thinking, I'm going to be paying for mail. Where am I going to be able to pick it up? How am I going to do this?
Yeah. It's that simple, though. If we can remember that the luggage transport services ply these routes every single day.
Yeah.
And for the price of a stage of moving a piece of luggage, they can bring forward whatever you left behind if you're willing to do the coordination.
And if I had been more experienced, I would have realized the next disaster was I was in Linsoan, which is a tiny little village between Burgete and Zubiri.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a charming, the albergue. It's just that's the only thing in town. There's no
That's
post
it.
office. There's nothing else. And the wonderful hosts, I was in my nirvana walking in that gorgeous forest before you start doing the descent in Zubiri. And I sat down. I'd already been walking for 3, 4 hours. And I sat down and took out my apple and took photos. And then I looked at my phone. I had an email, a phone call, and WhatsApp phone call, and a WhatsApp message, all from the host saying, "We found money on your bed." And I checked the bed and everything, but I sat down one more time to do my shoes or something, and 320 euro fell out of my bag.
Okay. That could be a game ender.
I couldn't think what to do because you can't really walk back because,
Mm.
that was a big walk. I had already
Mm-hmm.
walked like 4 hours. And I didn't have enough experience to think of anything more, but I got to Zubiri and had to get a taxi.
Wow.
And then I had to get back to Zubiri. So that was expensive. And then I get back to Zubiri and didn't have a place to stay.
Oh.
And I just decided to keep walking to Laura Serrano? No.
Lara Soania. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Laura Serrano. And so that goes back to even when you think this was the bad move, like I really wanted this one place in Zubiri and I didn't get it. And it was Mother's Day, all these things that came crashing. And so I was almost in tears. And when I decided I had to get a cab, but I couldn't use my phone, I heard these gals speaking English. They were a mix of English, American, and Australians. And they were all around, my age. And they were sitting and they said, "You look like you're going to cry." And I said, "I am." And I told them what it's like. "Oh, I live in Italy. I can call for you." And who's getting this girl a beer? It was like,
let's attend to her basic needs first.
Yeah, 5 past noon. Oh, hey, come on, come sit down. It was like, oh my God, it's Mother's Day. I can't believe that it's Mother's Day and you're with a bunch of mothers.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So it sounds like yes, there was a lot of emotion and a lot of swirl, but you had your senses about you to just resolve the problem.
I love that you use the word swirl because when there was swirl, I couldn't think clearly. Right. So it is just taking that deep breath and no one's injured. Nothing's bleeding. It's just take a deep breath. There is, the Camino provides, and there are times where it's like, don't you dare say that to me right now.
I will rip your head off. Yeah, but we'll take a deep breath and then I will just let it provide without saying that it does.
Yeah. And then surprise, guess what? It does.
You've got help. You've got help from directions you didn't expect it.
From directions you don't expect it, from people you may or may not ever see. I think that part is really interesting that, I have a memory of these women's bright, cheerful faces. I don't know who they were. I can't remember what the heck else. Then I'm thinking, I still have to walk. Is it another 6 or 7 kilometers? And I was
a little tired.
I had a big day already, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I stayed in San Nicolas in Morasoño. I loved it. I loved my walk there. I walked with these 2 guys who were friends from Switzerland, and they said, "Oh, this is nothing. We've walked," they started sharing.
These aren't Alps.
Yeah. And that idea of walking and talking, it's just walking and talking. You're walking and talking for 500 miles. And yes, it's a big adventure to wrap your head around.
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah. Wow. So I think you said, or I said, there were 3 things that happened.
Oh,
What
yes.
what was the third one?
I bought a pair of Lecky poles in from the couple at the top in Saint Jean. They have that wonderful hiking store.
Yeah, the Pilgrim Boutique. Yeah, it's a great shop.
And I sunk some dough and I love them, core candles. And I was walking out of Los Arcos. We had a bull run the night I was in Los Arcos. And I was walking out of Los Arcos and carrying my poles, like the two poles in my hand, and talking to France. And we were walking, 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 walking. It was still a little dark out, and as it's getting light, and talking about where we're going to get cafe con leche. And I started using my poles. As soon as I did, I realized they're not mine. I had the wrong poles.
Oh,
They were the only core candled poles in that bin, that big bin, and they weren't very good poles. And I thought, well, this where we're stopping for coffee, all the quick thinking you have to do and kind of
mm,
panic, swirl, swirl. And I thought, well, this is the first stop. It was already, 4 kilometers or something, but I put the poles up against the wall where people were coming around the corner, and I stood next to them with my cafe, and I figured whoever poles they were would have my poles. And so I heard this woman say, "Those are my poles." And she didn't have my poles. She had someone else's poles.
oh my goodness.
So she had grabbed someone else's poles. When I got to Logroño with these other women's poles, someone I knew said, "You took my poles. I had no poles all day." Blah blah. It's like, no,
There's a chain reaction going on here.
there were so many people trying to help me locate my poles. And somebody located my poles back in Los Arcos. I had put them down at one place where a friend was checking in.
Oh,
And then I took my backpack off, put my poles down, and then went to my place to put my backpack back on and never picked my poles up.
oh my gosh. So they were right where you left them.
They were where I left them because someone's saying, "Don't worry, nobody would have taken them,
Mm,
like stolen them. Nobody
hmm
would have." And I knew that. But it was really like between Facebook and different people. And then I knew somebody who was a day behind, and they organized with the luggage transport to get them to me 2 days later.
There it is. That's amazing. That's there's such a network along the Camino. And yeah, we can take advantage of that.
And people care. People genuinely, if you're having trouble, I didn't feel well, I lost my poles, I goofball left my packing
Packing
cube,
cube, yeah.
right?
People care. They do care and they want to help. I think that's our default as humans. And if we're not like that, something's gotten in the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Walking the Camino is a great way to reconnect with that part of us.
And I I want to add a little something.
Okay.
There's a lot of talk for people who are doing the whole from Saint Jean
Mhm.
about, oh God, when you get to Sarria, it's going to be so. And there's some of that on Facebook.
Yeah, there is.
Yes, it's different. And there's a shift in energy, and you're not going to have another day where you don't see anybody for a few hours. I think give over to it because it's a different energy.
Mhm.
It's a very lively, enthusiastic energy of people where that's for whatever reason, they can only take those 5 days. They don't feel ready to commit to something bigger. There were groups of school kids who were so much fun.
I love it.
They're
Yes.
all singing, they're all jumping up and down. They're having genuine good time.
Mhm.
And it really gave me a whole different feeling for, that was like the button at the end of the trip. You can't go back. You're not going to have your first day again. You're not going to have the meseta again right here. It's not going to be like that, but
This is what this is.
this is what this is.
Mm.
Full of enthusiasm.
Oh, yeah. And I think of the Sarria de Santiago stretch as sort of a transition period
Mhm.
because you've had this experience from Saint Jean to Sarria.
Yep.
And in about a week, you're going to be going home
Yeah.
where people don't even know what you just did and don't understand what you're thinking and feeling. So for me, Sarria to Santiago is that transition where I can start to recalibrate and get
Yes.
into the mindset of going home. So I think it's a critical part of the Camino.
I do too. I can't imagine missing it. And you also get to feel like a little bit of a rock star when people have started. They go, "Oh my God, you started in France." So, like, yes, I
I
did.
did. Thank you very much. Yes, you can buy me a drink. Oh, that's great. Now, when you look back at the whole trajectory, the whole thing that you did,
Yeah.
those three things where things went missing, are those just stories now, or is there still energy around them? Any regrets? Or oh, that was so bad.
No, I can't say there's regrets. However, it really, the thing that I said where it takes a few I think and if I didn't say it to you today, I've said it before. It takes a few days. It takes maybe 5 days to get your Camino on. To
Yep.
this is my routine. I like waking up at 6. I like walking toward a cup of coffee. I like watching, listening to the morning rise. It took me those experiences and then finally this leaving my missing poles to this always goes in this pocket. This always goes in this pocket. This is how I pack my backpack. The times that I sent my bag, any part of my bag ahead, this is with me. This stays with me. I always put this here. I always check this pocket before I go, you know?
Yeah, it's great. That's the rhythm of a pilgrim.
Yeah, because you take your passport out so many times and
Mhm.
your pilgrim passport too. I would make sure that I held both of those things in my hand as soon as they went back and forth and then put them exactly back where they belonged.
That's a great tip.
Yeah, because a pole or a packing cube or, the money even,
Yeah.
but your passport.
Oh, it's just going to be such an inconvenience to have to deal with a lost passport.
Hmm.
Doable, but really an inconvenience.
Yeah. So I want to go again.
Oh, you do now.
Yeah. I want to go. And there's so much. The Portuguese sounds really wonderful. I would do the Francés again happily, and maybe not the very next thing. Another Camino in between.
Okay. Yeah. Go get another route under your belt. And
I think so. I'll let you know.
oh, good. I can't wait to hear. So when you look back over this experience, if you were to pass on a piece of advice to first time pilgrims, people getting ready to walk the first Camino, what would you say?
Um, well, I was going to say don't overplan. I think you have to know yourself because there were definitely people who had it all planned. They had where they were staying every night, and there were definitely nights and days that I envied them. You know,
Okay.
I also saw people rushing because they had bookings they had to stay up with. In either case, you can't overplan this because stuff happens and life
Mm.
happens and days happen and walking happens and maybe you start feeling a hot spot and you need to pull over or somebody you really enjoy is going to stop here and you want to stop with them or you want to walk a little further than you thought. So it really really is life at the speed of walking and that's hard to translate until you've done it.
And it's hard to predict once you're in it. You
Yes.
you just don't know what the next day is going to bring.
Uh, and I'm
Yeah.
so excited for anybody who's planning their trip. And I hope they're doing it without, too much angst. I certainly had my days of angst.
Yeah. I think that's part of it when you take on something this big.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I walked with a lovely guy, Uli, from Germany as well. And he he was planning his retirement. He had it all planned. And then a year before that, his company did a big downsizing. And so suddenly he was without a job and he hadn't planned it and he'd always had a job.
Mm,
He said it kind of created a crisis for him.
sure.
And then he said, so when I thought, well, I'm going to do my Camino sooner than I thought I would. And he said, no, Melissa, when we finish this, we know we can do anything.
That's it.
In a way, it's very true.
Yeah.
You did this. I have a picture of myself standing in front of the 790 kilometers sign at Roncesvalles, right?
Do you remember how you felt?
Oh, I felt so excited. It's like, oh, but then you kind of go, whoa.
What did I take on?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a reality that sets in a few days in, actually, maybe a week in, where you think, okay, I'm on the way. I got started. I got my rhythm, but oh my gosh, how much farther is this?
I know. And
Yeah.
that is something about, somebody said, they said this about the meseta, but it could also be if you've got a big hill or something. Just look at what you can, like, bite off only as much as you can chew. If
Mhm.
you are on the meseta and you're looking and all you see is flat in front of you forever, look down at your feet, look at the flowers. Those were the only times I ever listened to music and I had an audiobook. So there were just 4 different days that I spent doing any of that. And that was really just for a few hours where that felt long.
Yeah. Perspective is everything. It's really good advice, Melissa. Thanks for that. Yeah. Well, any last minute words before we wrap up here?
Um, if you're planning on doing it, get that flight and go.
Say yes.
Just say yes. I think it's a lot of yes when you're there and you have a
Mhm.
choice. You can say, oh, no, that's too hard, or just say, yes, I'm going to try.
Yeah. Very good. Here's a little known fact. Planes go to Europe every day.
Yeah.
Get on one. Yeah.
Big shout out for albergues, I've got to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. People ask me, lots of people said, are you doing this alone? And I said, oh, no,
Not even close.
I'm solo, but I'm not alone.
Yeah.
The albergues can be such a wonderful way to meet people, connect, sit around in the lounge, share a beer, have a meal. Yeah, you're a whole bunch of puppies sleeping at night in, somewhat close quarters and maybe some snores, but hopefully you've got your, you know,
Your earplugs.
and whatever else you need, and you just,
You roll with it. You roll with it. See what happens.
yeah.
Ah, good. Melissa, thank you so much for taking the time today to talk with me and share your experiences. I bet my listeners are going to pull away some good things from this conversation. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah,
It was delightful. I'm so glad to be back with you. Thank you for this opportunity.
my pleasure. All right, talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.